Hey everyone, and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be going over my impressions of Legion, though first of all, this covers my impressions of the current incarnation of Legion. While Blizzard refers to it as the alpha, the actual builds themselves are referred to as beta on the client, and what all this means though is that the thing is incomplete, right? Players currently only have access to basically half of the game's actual zones, less than half of the number of specs overall, 2 dungeons, and 1 or 2 other things in terms of, like, the artifact quests and stuff like that. But it's not massive, and it does not cover the end game. Currently, the cap's actually level 104. We have also seen some improvements to the game's user interface, which are definitely quite nice. Most of them appear to be in the client at the minute, but we don't really know if they're going to be adding more stuff as time goes on. So I'm going to go through each individual aspect of the alpha and then tie it together with some overall thoughts. Let's start off with the zones themselves of Stormheim and High Mountain. From a visual perspective, both of these are fantastic, though they're going for a look that I am predisposed towards. I really like the style that they have anyway, so they're the kind of zones that I would like them. Questing has been very enjoyable so far, and that is without the voice acting, cutscenes, or even the cinematics really being added to the game. The pace of leveling is quite fast currently, though I'm hesitant to judge based on that because it's very early on in the testing process. In Warlords of Draenor, they actually increased the time to level during the beta. The current speed is absolutely too quick for my liking though. Zones were quite similar to Warlords of Draenor in that you had the main plot going on throughout the zone, and then a kind of few areas and side quests. In addition to that, you would also have some bonus objective areas and treasures, though the treasures don't actually seem to have any experience associated with them. This is perhaps a reaction to how OP treasures ended up being for leveling in Warlords, or it might just be that they're not implemented yet. It's a little bit too early to tell, but 2 of the game's 4 leveling zones have been very enjoyable in my experience. However, it's 4 leveling zones, and you could knock out 2 of these in not that much time whatsoever. It's only 4 zones. I'm maybe not particularly happy that when you're leveling up alts, you're going to be going through those same 4 zones. You're not going to be able to go through, say, a whole bunch of zones in a different order, and maybe, basically like with Wrath of the Lich King, have a different leveling path on an alt. So for the leveling, I'm sure the zones will be great and all of that stuff, but I'm maybe a little bit concerned at this stage as to the amount of content that's actually going to be there. Next, let's talk about the artifact weapon stuff. So the artifact weapons themselves are interesting. Most of their traits don't actually have a tremendous impact, but I think they do enough to earn their place in the game. Everyone running around with an Ashbringer does kind of feel really wonky, I'll admit, but it's less of an issue when you are dealing with the vast majority of artifacts, like say the Eagle Spear, that are less iconic. The concern that everybody's going to be running around with the same weapon model is an understandable one, but already when you take into account all of the model skins and color variations, Legion actually has more weapon looks than Warlords of Draenor by a pretty significant number. I assume they'll be adding more as time goes on, though certainly at the start of the expansion, when people don't have loads of skins unlocked, we all are going to be using the same visual weapon. The artifact quests themselves are pretty fun. They're normally not that hard, but most of them do involve some nice lore, and they do reinforce your class fantasy for the most part. There are a few quests that are shared between the different classes, and that is a point of criticism that I understand, but I think it's overblown for some classes. In almost every case, there is a shared artifact weapon quest that the actual class in question has, and then they have their own unique quest after that for the spec artifact weapon. So as an example, the Affliction Warlock, its artifact weapon is shared with Balanced Druids and Unholy Death Knights, but Warlocks before that run through a really cool scenario before you actually get that quest that is specific to Affliction. That said, some like, say, the Unholy DK do seem very sparse, and they really should have more content. Next up, Demon Hunters. You probably all know what I think about this. They are right now terrible, in my opinion, and that's even with the additions in the most recent beta build. You can watch my video on it for more information, but suffice to say, they really do need work. While there is room to add more things via talents, they are very, very much worryingly simple at a very base level. They don't have that much abilities or anything like that. And if you were to compare a level 104 Demon Hunter to a level 104 of any other class, and then, you were to take off their artifact weapon, disable all of their talents, what you would find is the Demon Hunter, without all those bells and whistles, is still way more simple. And yes, you can fill every GCD, and it does have a rotation that somewhat makes sense. The issue is that's a tremendously dull rotation. Their visuals are fantastic though, which is nice, but I did find their starting zone to be underwhelming in comparison to the Death Knight one, but it is still quite enjoyable. As for the class changes, bar the Demon Hunter, I've quite enjoyed all of the classes that I've played on the alpha for the most part, and of course forgiving some of the bugs. I don't main all of them, and there are some specs which are entirely new to me, like the Affliction Warlock and the Shadow Priest. So while there are still some quirks and bugs, yeah, I find them mostly to be quite fun. Shadow Priests were especially a blast, as were elements of Fury and Affliction. The Survival Hunter has a nice idea behind it, but I think the Mongoose Bite mechanic could use some serious work. Right now, it's got some issues which are going to prevent it being, I think, a realistically viable solution for that class's main design. Mainly that if you're playing with even a little bit of lag, you are at a pretty tremendous disadvantage to somebody who is playing with just about no lag, and there's a few things like that with Mongoose Bite windows that I don't think are particularly well designed. Still, it really is hard to tell about class changes at this stage. They are going to go through so much iteration as time goes on. Suffice to say, most of the time when they have kind of pruned back elements of a class and then tweak things around, added maybe the odd new ability, whatever, to really reinforce the class fantasy, I think for the most part they've done a good job of making the class fantasy work. What we just need to see for some things is more interesting talents, maybe, just things like that. But they are certainly off to a good start. Next up, the class order halls. So the game's class order halls are really quite cool as far as I'm concerned, from a visual perspective at least. I do like all of them as far as that goes. And really with functionality, it doesn't seem to be repeating the mistakes of Warlords of Draenor, but the most recent build did add a mission table, but it seems to be very placeholder according to the devs, and that just seems to be the general thought. To the degree where I don't really think it's worth mentioning a lot, suffice to say, I will make it my personal mission to fight off a repeat of the Warlords of Draenor mission table system should it come to pass in Legion. I mean, frankly, I think many of us are at the stage where if the mistakes of Warlords were repeated, we probably would just be quitting the game with Legion once we've got through the main bits of content. Let's move on to invasions. I did one video on these, it's a bit of a side point, but the Legion invasions of the old world were quite nice to see, and I really like how they are maybe a first step into making the regular world something that's actually used. I do hope that they are more than just an element of the game's launch event, because something like that could be a really good long-term addition to the game. Next, let's talk about dungeons. So both dungeons are quite enjoyable, fun enough mechanics. It's hard to judge overall, and these were only in normal mode, but given their track record with Warlords of Draenor, I think we're safe in assuming that the dungeons are going to be of a decent quality in Legion. I have not been able to test new challenge modes or anything like that because they're not in the alpha, but I look forward to seeing what they're like. It does seem like an appealing enough system. So on the topic of loot and stuff, yeah, I'm still worried about legendaries, I'm still worried about loot, I'm still worried about some of those, complaints surrounding, say, RNG that I've had with Warlords of Draenor, but we can't really test a lot of that, and that's really as far as this video is going to go overall, because that's covering all of the content for the most part that's actually available. So where does this leave me overall? I think cautiously optimistic would be the answer. I like the majority of what I've seen here, and I am really, really looking forward to seeing more. For me, the largest concern, though, is the amount of endgame content, and more importantly, to what degree they intend to support the game post-launch. If you think about Warlords of Draenor, yes, the content was fundamentally flawed in so many different regards, but if they had just pumped out more of it, say every 2 to 3 months, like what they say did with Mists of Pandaria, we would not have seen those sub-losses. It's the fact that they just quite literally left players hanging dry. So if they don't do that with Legion, then I think we're going to be in a pretty decent state. A while back they did state that Legion will receive more complete post-launch support, but actions speak larger than words, and certainly Blizzard are a company where you need to apply that philosophy, because sometimes they like to say things and, maybe it's because they themselves do get really excited about the things they're saying, but then those things don't turn out to be the case. I mean, certainly I loved, seamlessly running into Asheron, enjoying the epic battles with my friends and my server, and it was so, oh wait, no, none of that actually happened. Anyway, that's pretty much it for the video. I hope you have a bit more of a grasp of what I'm thinking about Legion overall. I kind of prioritize showing you stuff before giving my own kind of complete thoughts on it. But yeah, that's it for the video. Thanks for watching. Let me know what you've thought based on either playing it yourself if you've managed to get in, or just like watching people's content on it. I'm kind of interested to see what the overall opinions are with Legion. But yeah, that's it for me. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time.